Abzan mid-range deck. And as you said, yeah, a lot of the 1-drops in red have rotated out, so they are going to need replacements. So among the new cards in Kendall's deck, Frenzied Goblin, Monastery Swift Spear. That's the 1/2 haste prowess for 1.
And not even that many spells in this deck, so...
No, he's just Raging Goblin with slight upside.
The slightest of upsides.
Chris starts out on Elvish Mystic. We'll see where Kendall is at. He has 16 1-drops in the deck. The non-creature spells are 4 Lightning Strike, 4 Stoke the Flame, and 2 Titan's Strength.
So Chris's deck, not that bad at getting an Elvish Mystic to play on turn 1. There are some comes into play tap lands, but he has 4 copies of Llanowar Waste, 3 Forests, 4 copies of Windswept Heath.
Yeah, Kendall will start. You said start on a fetch land. Yeah, so you said 8 fetch lands, 10 actual mountains, just trying to get maybe only 3 lands a game, trying to get them all out of his deck as fast as possible.
Even less. I think that this deck kind of stops on 2. I guess there's Rabble Master at the top, but this is a really low-end boss Sly build.
All right, we are going to have that Monastery Swift Spear. It's the turn 1 play, swinging in for 1 past Elvish Mystic, and he'll ship back to Chris. And that's a pretty telltale play on the other side of the board if you wanted to know what your opponent's up to.
Yep. There's no surprises here. I guess it's possible the Wooded Foothills could make things a little weird for Chris. Maybe he's on some sort of 2-color build, but when your opponent starts off with the Raging Goblin, they're usually being pretty straightforward about what their intentions are.
And Chris, I was going to say, he played a Temple, wondering if he had the Sylvan Caryatid, and he did. So 0/3 blocker will very possibly get in the way here.
Very good start here for Chris.
Second fetch land for Kendall. He'll swing the Swift Spear. Is Titan Strength is the card he could have that would push through here?
Or,
Or it's nothing.
2 shock effects of some sort, or,
He could also actually have, he's playing 4 Warname Aspirants, so he could just be wanting to trigger Raid is another possibility.
Yeah, well, the attack's a free roll. There's no risk from Kendall's side, so you get to deal a point of damage, and if you have some set of tricks, maybe Chris ends up losing the Sylvan Caryatid, but that's part of the reason I think Chris wants to block there is the attack's free. The life total matters. You don't want to take points of damage. You don't have to, so if you trade with a trick, it's probably not ideal for Chris, but it's better than just letting these free shots go through.
Yeah, Chris does call it, so he makes the block. Chris will stay at 19. Kendall's going to fetch for a second land here. We'll see, is it 2 1-drops or a 2-drop? It's a 2-drop, and it is Warname Aspirant. So Raid being triggered means that it's a 3/2. And the ability on Warname Aspirant is pretty relevant in this matchup.
You're looking at a board right now of Elvish Mystic and Sylvan Caryatid, and neither of those can block.
So we'll see if Chris can just Siege Rhino it up. He's going to have 5 mana available to him. You see on the left there, Warname Aspirant, one of the additions to a red deck wins. This one comes out of Khans of Tarkir. 3/2 for 2 most of the time that can't really be blocked by most of the smaller creatures of the format.
Not only the smaller creatures of the format, but Elspeth tokens. That's a big deal too. These red decks, they lose Legion Loyalists. That was one of their best tools at beating Elspeth. Warname Aspirant gives them some game against it.
Chris with his 5th mana is going to just play Banishing Light on the Warname Aspirant. No huge follow-up there, but it'll take all the threats off the board for Kendall.
I like it. All Chris really needs to do is, keep his head above water. The risk here is that if Kendall has a Goblin Rabble Master next turn and Chris doesn't have an answer, then the game might get away from him very quickly.
Yeah, Chris, it looks like just has 3 more lands in his hand at the moment. So a little bit of flood. And as you predicted, Goblin Rabble Master is the turn 3 play for Kendall Kasper. Goblin token will be made. And it and the Swift Spear can both crash in. Chris gets to block one of them, but he will take one.
And now Chris needs one of his big draws pronto.
Something like Siege Rhino would really help. We'll see, he gets another Sylvan Caryatid.
That is not helpful.
Yeah. The worry right here would be that because Chris doesn't have even another Elvish Mystic in play, Kendall can actually attack with the Goblin Rabble Master himself.
This is all sorts of trouble for Chris. And now we might be entering the stage of the game where even a Siege Rhino may not matter that much.
Yeah, you don't want to let Rabble Master start turning sideways if at all possible.
Yeah, Kendall's board's now developing. He's uncontested. He's got leftovers in that hand too. That he's not done.
Yeah, second Monastery Swift Spear is the first play. He's going to make another Goblin token, swing 5 creatures in. And remember, we could see a Lightning Strike just to Chris's face used to pump the Swift Spears.
Now, I think there might be a Borderland Marauder in Kendall's hand, so I would expect that his post-combat play here is just add another 3-power threat, but we'll see.
Sure.
Because then next turn he gets to do all of that.
Right now, this is a swing for 8 damage. Chris gets a free block on 2 of it, but looks like he may take 6. Unless he wants to get rid of some of his creatures.
I'm intrigued by the fetch lands no synergy thing going on in Kendall's deck. It's, I understand what you're trying to do is hope that you draw lands in your opening hand and then fewer lands over the course of the game. But the points of damage you're taking are a real cost.
Let's go to something like Legacy. In a Legacy burn deck, you do this, right?
Well, you have Searing Blaze and Grim Lavamancer, so you have other factors for fetch lands.
Yeah, there are no delve cards in this
deck. There's no synergy. This is just, I want lands in my opening hand, and I want to thin out as I'm going.
Yeah.
Which is not a terrible instinct. It's just not clear that it's worth the life total.
All right. Chris is going to trade an Elvish Mystic for a Goblin token, trying to keep that Rabblemaster damage down. He's going to put 1/3s in front of both the Aspirants and take 5. And as you said, just more creatures for Kendall. This one's Borderland Marauder and Frenzied Goblin.
Yep, just some more pieces of poop.
I mean, especially Frenzied Goblin.
Good enough to get it done.
Frenzied Goblin against the team of Hexproofers. It's actually just a 1/1.
Well, it does cut off a lot of Chris's draws here. Now, things like Police Main Line and Siege Rhino do very little.
Yeah, and Chris just has 2 more lands. Not to mention, Frenzied Goblin is a Goblin for the Rabblemaster, so...
Yep. And another thing to factor in here, Chris's list, no copies of Elspeth in the main deck, Sorin and Nissa, so Frenzied Goblin's not bad against the Planeswalkers in this list either.
Yeah, well, when he doesn't have a true sweeper in his deck, like, there are very few cards that recover him from this board. He doesn't have that, that one thing that he could top deck, that Elspeth that just starts to shore things up, for example. I
played all sorts of games last season against various sorts of Abzan and black-white mid-range lists, and you could be winning, and Elspeth shows up and shuts the door. It could be that fast.
Yeah, it was that bad.
Now, with the way that Chris's list is constructed, there's really no haymaker along the same lines. Now, there's a very powerful early game here, but once we get into this spot, there's no sweeper, there's no Elspeth, there's no haymaker to catch him back up.
And a huge attack from Kendall. We're going to see Monastery Swift Spear, I think, in action. Chris is going to block the Frenzied Goblin and the Rabblemaster. Right now, it looks like he's going to take 7 damage. Kendall, with the Lightning Strike, can make it 12 here.
Yeah.
And that is exact. That'll put Chris down to 9, pump both Swift Spears, put it up to 12 total damage, and that will be lethal. And we are on to game 2. Kendall Kasper up 1-0.
Yeah, not a lot to be said about that game there. Chris, never got anything proactive going, had no removal spell for the Rabblemaster, and that's it. I mean, it's over that fast.
Yeah, we saw this before when we've seen these Abzan mid-range decks play against low-to-the-ground strategies. We saw it against Mono Black. They tend to be very weak game 1 and then have a large sideboard. Walk me through what Chris is going to do here.
He's got a lot to catch up in this matchup. 2 copies of Drowned Sorrow, 3 copies of Nyx Fleece Ram, 2 copies of Suspension Field, 2 copies of Elspeth Sun's Champion, 2 copies of Reclamation Sage, 2 Glare of Heresy, and Abzan Charm, and an Ajani Mentor of Heroes.
So of those, Drown in Sorrow, excellent.
Yes, A+.
A+. Nyx Fleece Ram.
A+.
Great. Elspeth Sun's Champion, probably better than Nissa World Waker.
Right. It's not the best card in the matchup by any stretch, but it is a much better game winner than the other Planeswalkers he has access to.
Yeah. Outside of that, I don't see much in his sideboard that would come in.
The Suspension Field's very nice.
Well, that doesn't hit anything, does it?
It's 3 or less, or 3 up? It's 3 or... Oh, 3. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, then there's nothing else really going on. John Sorrow, Nyx Fleece Ram, Elspeth Sun's Champion.
Yeah. On Kendall's side, he does have the ability to go bigger in these matchups if he suspects a lot of removal. He does have 2 Hammer of Perforos. This is something which we really see out of the sideboard in these decks. Other than that, he has tell me through how big does he want to get? He has 2 Chandra Pyromaster, and he can play Harness by Force as well if he wants. He has extra mountains to board in if he does that plan.
Well, the problem with Harness by Force is if you're concerned that Chris is going to be like this game plan of kill all your creatures and then win with a Planeswalker, Harness by Force really doesn't do a lot there. Hammer of Perforos is also low in power against a deck that's able to lock up the ground. So a lot of the tools that he has access to in this matchup don't line up the best way against Chris in these post-board games. Maybe he still wants to just have a little more staying power and go to something like Hammer of Perforos, but Harness by Force, I think, is actively not good against Chris. He has a lot of blockers. The only really big target in the list is a Siege Rhino, and it's hard to kill someone with a Siege Rhino you're taking because it's only 4 power and they've just gained 3. So if I was in Kendall's seat and I knew what Chris's 75 was, I would probably just shuffle up and present the same 60.
Certainly close to it. You're right. Chris is going to, his game plan is to clog up the ground, kill some creatures, and then really win whenever he wants.
And Chris's list is pretty susceptible to just, someone dumping out creatures into play. He does have the 2 Drowned Sorrows on his board, but that's still, there's only 2 copies again, so.
Absolutely agree. And that's why he has a lot of cards for this matchup in his board. Drowned Sorrows, in addition to Nyx Fleece Rams, is a pretty good acknowledgement that this is not a great matchup game 1.
For sure. And it isn't. He's got a lot of lands that are coming to play tap, dealing damage to him. Only a couple creatures in his deck that gain life, and he can get draws of just removal spells and planeswalkers, let's say. Good against many decks, but not enough to keep up with mono red.
Yeah. We'll see going... So you'd said Hammer of Perforos before. You weren't as thrilled about it in this matchup, and that's because Chris is playing 0-5s and 4-5s?
Right. It's, Hammer of Perforos is not great against Nyx Fleece Ram, for example. So
sure.
I think that the creatures and a couple burn spells / pump spells is the best thing that Kendall can really bring to the table in the matchup.
Now, if Courser of Krufix is what every deck is doing in the format, or what your control decks are doing, where is Hammer still a card? Like, where does it come in anymore?
The only matchup I really liked Hammer in the old standard was against Mono Black Devotion. I didn't even like it that much against Blue-White / Esper. It was okay against those decks, but they had Detention Spheres. They could keep up with Supreme Verdict. It wasn't good against Elspeth. There were problems with the card. It was only good against decks where their game plan was, I'm going to bring 20 copies of Terminate to the table and try to beat you that way.
Yeah, it's absolutely good there.
It is really good, and that's what Mono Black was trying to do. Chris's deck, there's a little bit of that element to it. There are a fair number of removal spells, but he is able to play to the ground with big stuff, things that are much bigger than 3/3s. And in that kind of matchup, Hammer's always underperformed for me.
We'll see what Kendall does with the deck here. You're right, his main deck is pretty tight. There's, he's just playing the most efficient red beaters.
Yeah, no, there's no messing around here. This is as straightforward as it gets.
Yeah, a lot of his cards on the board are 4 aggro mirrors. He seems pretty well prepared for those with 4 Searing Blood and 2 Arc Lightning. Looks like we are about to be underway here. All right, so while these players are getting ready for the game, I want to talk a little bit about Star City Games States. That's coming up here actually in 2 weeks.
Yep, we have GP Orlando next weekend, and the following weekend is Star City Games States. It's going to be Pro Tour weekend, so if you're not qualified, make sure to go over to starcitygames.com/states. Find out where your states have area. We're also expanding that program. We have regionals available for the winter and summer of next year, so we're always going to have either a states or regionals program occurring on Pro Tour weekend. So if you are not qualified for these events, make sure just hit up our website for more information. If you're seeing these decks right now during this coverage, pouring through the decks that are going to be posted from the SCG in Indianapolis, you want to go out and play in a competitive, big standard tournament, well, it's only 2 weekends away. So make sure to go to starcitygames.com/states for more information.
Yeah. So like you said, this means there are 2 states a year, 2 regional championships a year. They are on Pro Tour weekends, so it's going to go, they alternate which one they have happen. It gives you the opportunity to plant your flag in your region, take on that title of state champion, and qualify for the Star City Games Invitational.
Yeah, points, play mats, Open Series points, obviously, and here is all the dates for next year. Again, these are the Pro Tour weekends. State championships in the spring and autumn. That October 17th, 18th date, that is for 2015. The 2014 one coming up in 2 weeks, that's a different date. And then you see winter and summer, February 7th, 8th, and August, 1st and 2nd. So you can go to StarCityGames.com, find out more information. And if you're looking to play in some more big standard tournaments with a lot of prizes on the line, make sure not to miss it.
All right, and we are underway, as you see now, with Game 2. Chris VanMeter was on the play. He is down a game right now. He started with a tri-landing to play tapped, and it's going to be, once again, Monastery Swift Spear on Kendall's side. And we'll see. So he gets 1 damage in, Chris down to 19. See what kind of defenses Chris has here. He's going to play Sylvan Caryatid on turn 2.
The best defense.
Pretty good in this. It functions double in this matchup. It's usually a big enough blocker to stop anything, and on top of that, it's a mana accelerant. A second Swift Spear for Kendall Kasper. He swings them both. Chris is going to block one of them. He just takes 1, goes to 18. And it's Fire Drinker Satyr for Kendall. So
these are the types of draws that are not that robust against the card Drown in Sorrow.
No, they tend to be weak against Drown.
And not very good against Drown in Sorrow.
But without Drown, among the best things the deck can be doing, the triple 1-drop start certainly is hard for a lot of tap land decks to beat.
Well, it's very good against the Hero's Downfall type of draws that Chris brings to the table. So it's, you're beating something at least.
Exactly. If your opponent's having to pay 3 mana to kill your 1 mana creatures, then you're ending up ahead.
Yeah.
Now it looks like Chris may have to do just that, possibly even paying life points on the way to do it. And he's just going to make Siege Rhino. That's a turn 3 Siege Rhino on the play. Very good for Chris. He'll put him up to 20. He did have to take a pain for that one. Puts Kendall down on life points here. And that's a pretty hard card, you'd think, for Kendall to get through.
Yes, it is. I mean, Frenzy Goblins is his major out to it, but other than that, it's going to be a struggle.
I would think if you're a red deck wins player, the fact that there's a Luxodon Hierarch style card that people can main deck has got to be pretty demoralizing. But unless you play your board in your Harness by Force, which is what Kendall has, he's going to steal Siege Rhino, pump both his Monastery Swift Spears. That's a swing for 2, 4, 6, 10 damage and puts Chris down to 10.
I was questioning Harness by Force. That's the kind of draw where it's ideal. Your opponent taps out for a Siege Rhino, has no other blockers, no removal spells up, and you already have a board. You have a board already available.
Yeah, 3 1-drops into Harness by Force. A pretty great curve there for Kendall. So he's halfway through Chris's life total. And I really do like mono red in this metagame when we see these 3-color black decks and just how much damage they're dealing to themselves.
That's the thing. Is your mono red deck going to struggle against Siege Rhino? Definitely. But is your mono red deck going to be really good against Siege Rhino decks in the games where they don't draw Siege Rhino? Probably, because there's so many points of damage and comes into play tap lands coming off of their lands that you have a big edge where this card does not appear.
Exactly. We see Chris's hand does have a copy of Sorin Solemn Visitor in it. Looks like he has a lot of defense here, but he's figured out what he's defending himself from. He has seen up Harness by Force already.
This is sort of the squeeze. He can hang back on defense, but then he risks things like Stoke the Flame stealing the game from him, or he can go on offense, but then things like the Harness by Force we just saw could be a big issue. So he's got to figure out what cards out of Kendall's deck he wants to play around and what he's willing to risk.
Yeah, he does have a lot of life gain here, really. He had the option of playing one of 2 Corsive Crufixes. Instead, he played Sorin Solemn Visitor. He's just going to plus it to give Siege Rhino 1-0 and lifelink and hit Kasper for 5.
And he's leaving this Sorin completely exposed on the way back. He's just saying, if you take your turn here and I gain 5 points of life, that's going to be good enough. I don't need to squeeze that much out of this Sorin.
And you think Kendall's going to have to remove the Sorin. It seems if Chris can keep doing these 5-point life swings, I don't think Kendall can win through it.
For sure, he's got to get this off the table.
But it does mean he's sending his resources at things that are not Chris. And when you look at the fact that Kendall's at 11, he may be on the losing end of this race.
I like that Chris found a line of play that allowed him to both shorten the length of the game and gain life. Those are the two priorities for him right now.
All right, with that, we look at Kendall. He does have a Titan Strength and Frenzied Goblin in hand. Frenzied Goblin, a card I've been very impressed with.
It's very good against the type of decks that Chris is playing, you know.
Yeah. We see Fire Drinker Satyr goes at Sorin. It gets Titan Strength, so it's for 5. It's going to pump both the Monastery Swift Spears, so Chris takes 4. He drops to 11. And there you have 11 all. Kendall follows up with a Frenzied Goblin and passes back.
And as bad as things have been going for Kendall, this game is still winnable, you know? Which says a lot about the power level of these red cards and how much these lands really cost Chris.
Chris has gained 8 life this game.
Yep.
And probably will gain more if you look at that. He has 2 Courser of Krufix in his hand. But even so, he's still not necessarily winning the race.
He has access to another Siege Rhino.
Ooh, what a beating. Just how much life gain can a red deck actually beat? I suppose that's what we're gonna find out. Second Siege Rhino for Chris. He's gonna have to take 1 to play it, so he only gains 2. He goes to 13. Kendall takes 4, then 3. He's down to 4.
And Chris, with the Caryatid back on defense, can survive something like another Harness by Force, so.
You know, and this is something that these Obstinate Baloth cards never did, was they never raced like this.
Yeah, there's some spots I've been against cards like this, like Hierarch and Ravenous Baloth, where you can still be chump blocking to give yourself the time to draw burn spells, and you don't have that option against Siege Rhino.
No, I'm thinking from the red deck of, oh man, he gained 3 again. That's pretty annoying. And then you stop and take a look at your life total and you think, well, wait a second, I'm at 4 here. When did this happen?
Before you even know it. You know, you're not even paying attention to your life total in most of these games, and then you look down and, as you mentioned, Kendall suddenly finds himself at 4, facing lethal next turn.
Kendall with a decision here. He plays Goblin Rabble Master. We will soon see whether this is pre or post combat. It is pre-combat. Both goblins have to swing. Chris gets to eat the Frenzied Goblin.
Yeah, I think you wanted to play this Rabble Master post-combat. Not that it matters too much. Kendall's
one way
pretty
Kendall
much just
gets
dead.
a token, and the other way he gets a Frenzied Goblin. So he would have wanted to play it post-combat so he could have a Frenzied Goblin.
Right.
But you're right that I don't know how much it matters either way. Chris is in a great spot. With 8 power worth of trample on the board, he's actually dead because, well, no, he has 6 toughness on his side. So, and he has to block with all 6 of it. He can't actually block with Fire Drinker Satyr because Kendall will still take the damage anyway.
Now, this is an interesting spot here. Chris has drawn Drown in Sorrow this turn. He could just cast Drown in Sorrow and kill Kendall. Kendall's at 4,
Right.
the 2 Rhinos. But there's a lot of value in Kendall not knowing that that card's in your deck. So Chris was
Exactly.
trying to figure out, am I ahead by such a margin that I don't have to cast this Drown in Sorrow and keep it concealed, or do I win the game this turn? Chris felt that he was ahead by enough that it wasn't necessary, and instead is able to keep that card hidden for game 3.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, if you can swing the Siege Rhinos, and if you're worried post-Siege Rhino, which I'm not sure how you would be, but if you are, you can Drown in Sorrow then, and it's still game-winning.
That's a play that I see a lot of players who are just getting into tournament Magic, they never see. There's a lot of new players there that would just untap, cast a Drown in Sorrow, and attack for lethal. But particularly with a card like that, there's a lot of value to be gained from giving it hidden, and you can see Chris drawing there and thinking for a while of, do I have to show this card? Am I ahead by enough that nothing can really go wrong and I can keep it concealed? And instead of just casting it and having Kendall perhaps play around in game 3, now it's all hidden.
Exactly, and that's something, I mean, there's a lot of excitement to when you board in a card like Drown in Sorrow for a specific matchup, and then you get to draw it on a board where it's lights out. You know, there's a lot of excitement to playing that before stopping to think whether you actually need to.
Right.
So you're right, we are on to game 3. Yeah, and so one of the cards that we now finally get to play with, we saw Chris cast that game, was Sorin Solemn Visitor. We saw how good its +1/+0 ability can be in games, but it has a second ability, and we have a sweet token to go with it if you haven't seen it.
We do the debut of Tom Ross's second invitational token from his back-to-back invitational wins. Just incredible here. You get this token by signing up for any standard open, so make sure to come out and get these sweet tokens.
Yeah, for all of the fourth quarter, that's through mid-December, these tokens will be given with entry to the Star City Games Standard Open. Make sure to make it out to one of those. And I do like this token quite a bit.
And if, there's any American city that has sort of a vampire feel to it, it's definitely New Orleans. So this is a great token for Tom to have access to. Good stuff.
He's got the leather. Tom always wearing a leather jacket. You know, that's very vampire-esque as well.
It's very expressive for Tom. That's not an ideal fit, but you got to communicate the vampire thing with the teeth. I get it, but very cool token. And again, 2 in a row for Tom, which is just incredible.
No, definitely an impressive finish. And going back to the game, so I wanted to look at how Sorin Solemn Visitor actually plays out in this matchup. His plus ability, if you aren't aware, and I actually wasn't, persists all the way through to the next turn. So cards like Sylvan Caryatid actually work pretty well with Sorin in this matchup.
It's a very, high ceiling, low floor sort of card. There's some games where it's nonsense. If this is Chris's first play of the game on turn 4, or he was already under the gun, he's going to make a vampire and it's just going to die, or it's just going to save him a few life points. In situations where his board's fairly advanced, he can either start going +1/+0 and lifelink on his creatures in play, which is excellent, or start churning out 2/2 flyers, which is give him a clock while his other blockers hold down the ground. So when Chris has a good draw, Sorin is going to be maybe the piece that puts it over the top. And if his draw is bad, Sorin's going to offer no help.
All right, we'll see game 3 underway here. Kendall's going to be on the play. Last game, we really saw Chris break out the life game. It was Siege Rhino into Sorin Plus into another Siege Rhino. We never even got to the pair of Courser of Krufix in his hand.
Didn't even need to go to it. Chris taking a mulligan here, and his hand, I think, was Lance and Spells. And I like these kind of mulligans in this sort of matchup where if Chris loses, it's not going to be because he gets out-carded. Kendall's casting 1/2 hasters for 1. It's not that sort of game. Chris needs to find his specific tools because his Courser of Krufix, Siege Rhino, Drown in Sorrow, those are all worth numerous cards out of Kendall's deck. So find the right tools. Don't just keep hands of lands and, a Hero's Downfall and a Banishing Light, because that's not going to get it done here.
Yeah, one of the things why I like strategic mulligans on Chris's side is that in a matchup like this, the width between the best cards in Chris's deck and the worst cards in this matchup is really big.
It's huge.
So, one of your draws, for example, could be Elvish Mist. You could have, Elvish Mystics into Heroes Downfalls is one thing your deck could do. And on the other hand, you could play Nyx Fleece Rams into Siege Rhinos.
Yeah, Chris has no lack of lights out cards in the matchup. If he loses, it's not going to be because, he sort of traded 1-for-1 and he had the last thing left over. It's not that kind of game. It's can you find the powerful cards for the matchup?
Kendall's on the play. He has Fire Drinker Satyr, which probably the best 1-drop that he still has left in the deck.
Yeah, even Foundry Street Denizens a lot worse now that Burning Tree Emissary is no longer in the deck. And Frenzy Goblin is a very powerful card, but it's not something you want to draw a bunch of. You want one Frenzy Goblin on turn 3. Fire Drinker Satyr is definitely the play you want.
Yeah, it's going to crash in for 2. Chris just had a tap land on turn 1. This matchup is a lot more difficult for him when he's on the draw. Kendall will follow up the Fire Drinker Satyr with Borderland Marauder. That's the 1/2 for 2 out of M15.
It's not pretty, but, it'll get it done.
It attacks for 3. That's the job. Chris does have one of those high-impact cards, though. It's going to be Nyx Fleece Ram on his side.
And, again, this is why the strategic mulligans are so important, because Nyx Fleece Ram is worth well over 1 card out of Kendall's deck.
Yeah. Kendall could have Titan Strength for it, and that would probably be the best scenario. He would like to not have to spend Lightning Strike or Stoke the Flames on it, because it would take a creature and the turn to do it.
Yeah, it's a big cost, but
we will see. Swing with both creatures. See what Chris decides to block here, the 2 or the 3. if he's worried about a card like Shock, he can block Fire Drinker Satyr.
Well,
Kendall didn't play a land pre-combat.
I think it's just too important here for Chris to preserve his life total as much as possible. Because he could still go post-combat land Shock, so it's not even a guarantee. Sure. And every point of damage matters so much that just keep your head above water.
All right, well, over on Kendall's side, he makes another Borderland Marauder and plays a Mountain for the turn. Chris gets to life gain back up to 17 on his upkeep. And while Nixley Sam is great, it's going to need some backup. It's not there to block to win the game, it's just there to stall the game.
And so far, Chris's mana base has been very kind to him. He played the ideal land on turn 1 and ideal land on turn 2.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. He's taken 0 off it, and it hasn't stopped any of his plays yet.
And now 0 on turn 3, so...
Courser of Krufix is the play. Shows Swamp on top of Chris's deck. And Courser lines up so nicely against these 3/2s. We'll see how Kendall gets through. His draw for the turn was Eidolon of the Great Revel. A little late, but still probably good.
Well, let's see what... I mean, Kendall he had the option of really emptying out that turn. His hand was 2 creatures and the Stoke the Flames, so he could have played his 2 creatures and still stoked the Courser. He gives up an attack that turn, but the following turn he has a lot of pressure in play.
Yeah, his creatures are both 2-drops. Looks like he decides to stoke the Courser and then swing in. He gets Chris down to 12, but Chris follows it up once again with Siege Rhino.
And so far, so good for Chris. Again, the lands, he's been kept totally clean thus far.
And just so much life gain on Chris's side. So much defense.
Yeah.
Saying before, if he can get the right cards for the matchup, it's really difficult for Kendall's deck to break through. And right now, Chris has him stalled out at a healthy 15 life.
Yeah, the highs are so high in Chris's deck here.
See, the last card's in Kendall's hand. Eidolon of the Great Revel, 3rd Borderland Minotaur, or Marauder. Good creatures, but none of them that interact well with Siege Rhino.
I get that tripped up a lot too, because Red has a lot of Minotaurs, and from a distance, the art sort of looks like a Minotaur.
Borderland Minotaur was actually a card, though, too.
Oh, it's the 4/3 for 4,
yeah, it's
right?
the 4/3 for 4.
Yeah. Another source of confusion. It already exists.
I don't think you'd want to play that one.
I've probably played worse.
In Red Deck Wins?
I probably have played worse.
All right. I mean, you've cast Rubble Belt Maka. If you're playing it off all mountains, that's just a 3/3, not a 4/3.
So this is a small thing here. Kendall emptying out the rest of his hand. He has a land left over in his hand, and I think it was important for him to play it that turn. I know he wants to bluff a little bit, but if he draws a land next turn, then his Fire Drinker Satyr can be pumped up to 5 toughness, and it forces something out of Chris, a removal spell, a trade with a Siege Rhino, or damage. So I think he needed to play his land last turn.
I agree. The draw for Chris that turn was Murderous Cut. So he does have a healthy amount of removal to back up this Rhino and Sheep combination.
But he's pretty safe at this spot. I mean, there's not a lot of cards in these red decks that exist now that allow them to be 5 toughness creatures.
Yeah, I think the draw, and it's in Kendall's sideboard, so we don't even know if it's there, would be Chandra Pyromaster.
Yeah.
If he could use that, the +1 ability that makes it so a creature can't block would be really powerful against this Siege Rhino.
Well, Harnessed by Force is nice here too, because he can actually strive it and take everything. So he can get that
Yes.
ram out of the way, and if Chris ever commits another threatening creature, he could lose it all.
Yeah, it's 3 to cast and then 3 more to strive, I believe. So he needs some more lands, but that can happen over time. Sorin, Solemn Visitor is the play for Chris. And I'm interested to see what mode he goes with. I think he has to minus it almost here. Plussing it, he can't plus it and attack it. He's not so far ahead.
He can plus it and say go.
He can plus it and so just build up toward the emblem.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, a 2/2 token doesn't do a lot. He can start attacking for 2 in the air, I suppose. It's not really that impressive. But the +1 means that now the ram is eating the Fire Drinker Satyr instead of just bouncing off of something.
Chris feels pretty safe here to play the Sorin. He does have a Hero's Downfall and Murderous Cut in his hand. Did not leave either of them up. Just went with Sorin.
The other issue here is that, you know, part of the reason that it may be attractive for Chris to minus there instead is because the emblem isn't worth a ton here.
Yeah, it's not gonna get particularly good creatures.
Yeah.
And the draw.
I'm pretty sure a Raging Goblin guy can find something bad to throw away to a Sorin emblem every turn.
Yeah.
It's still better, you know, once you have it supplemented by the removal spells in Chris's hands, it can be really good, but.
Now Kendall plays Land of Wooded Foothills, and Harnessed by Force was the draw for the turn.
Exciting.
And I think he's wondering if he takes the Rhino, if it's a 5/5 or a 4/5.
Yes.
Looks like there's a judge call on that one. And we'll get an answer to that one in just a second. I mean, I can't see his play being anything except take Rhino, hit with everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% confident on this one, so we'll see.
Right. All right.
Yeah, I guess it just tags the things that are in play.
Okay. So when he takes it, it's going to be a 5/5 with lifelink.
What a deal.
What a draw for Kendall Kasper here. So on his attacks, we'll see whether or not he goes at Sorin. He has 3, 6, 9, 11, 13, 14, 19 power worth of attackers here.
So
that's assuming he cracks the fetch line and pumps the Fire Drinker Satyr.
Yeah. Which means that probably, I would imagine Kendall's just going at Chris.
Yeah, actually he could, because if it's 19, which I believe it is, Chris has to put Nyx Fleece Ram in front of Siege Rhino.
Which is awesome for Kendall.
Yeah, and so then Chris would gain 1, take 14, he'd go to 3, and just have Siege Rhino left. And
yeah, this is
Kendall would lose nothing.
Yeah, this is lethal.
You think it's lethal through the Ram?
No. The Rhino, the Ram in front of the Rhino stops it, but I was looking to see if Chris had access to a different block, and he does not.
Yeah.
Because his only other blocks allows him to absorb 3.
Kendall just wants to be sure here. Remember, if Chris could block anything else, the Ram is a 1/5, so it just would eat a Fire Drinker Satyr, for example.
Yeah.
Kendall down to 13. He did take 2 off his own Eidolon. That one unlikely to matter.
Yeah.
And there we go. Everybody in.
There you go, Kendall.
Figured it out.
Yeah. You can't harness by force and then not attack with everything, so the die is cast.
I mean, even if it's not lethal, what's your other plan?
Exactly.
We'll see it. If we have it counted right, we think it's for 19. If Chris agrees, then he's going to have to make the unfortunate block of putting his Ram in front of his own Rhino.
Well, he can actually, because he gains 1 off of the Nyx Fleece Ram.
So he's at 17. You could think of it that way.
If he blocks the Fire Drinker Satyr, then 5, 6, 7, plus 9 is 16, and then plus 1, he falls to 1, which means he's then locked out of playing anything 3 or less because of the Eidolon. He's probably forced at that point to Sorin and attack with the Siege Rhino next turn.
Right. I would bet that's the play he makes. Well, that's probably better than chumping. We'll see if he goes for it. It also means he's locked out of cracking that fetch land. Yeah, he's going to put Nyx Fleece Ram in front of Fire Drinker Satyr. No reason for Kendall to pump here. It's going to die both ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, Chris will go up to 17. Remember, lifelink now happens at the same time as regular damage. So this is an attack for 16. Chris will, because thanks to Nyx Fleece Ram's 1, he'll go to 1.
Yep.
Fire Drinker Satyr dies, and Kendall takes 1. So Kendall goes to 12. And he gives Chris his Rhino back.
All right.
And strange enough, Chris does have a chance here.
Oh, for sure. No, this is totally a game. He's going to gain a lot this turn.
Goes up to 2. Let's see, Fleece Mane Lion, Hero's Downfall, Murderous Cut in Chris's hand.
Not a great hand here. 2 of these cards trigger the Eidolon, and the other one is his whole turn and not that efficient.
Now, do you think Chris, when he tapped out for Sorin, did he know that he could survive the Harness by Force there?
I'm not sure, but, you know, I think Chris's line of play is about the best thing that he could do there regardless.
Sure. Chris cannot, at the moment, unless he attacks with his Rhino, he can't play the Hero's Downfall or the Fleece Main line. So he has to swing here.
Yeah, well, he can do this, and you know, if he plays the Lion post combat, it's starting to make blocking really or attacking really challenging for Kendall. That was awkward. He can't get the. I guess he can't get the trigger on the Lion because he has the sword.
Right.
All awkwardness.
Yeah, he can't. The Fleece Main line will not have lifelink.
Right.
And if you're Chris, it's not certain you can survive here. His own mana's coming back to get him again.
Right.
If he wants to cast both Downfall and Lion, first he'd take 2 off both the spells. So maybe he can't even do that. But to use all his mana, he's going to have to take 2 damage because that's a lot of colored spells.
No, he can, in theory, Windswept Heath for Plains,
Right.
cast the Hero's Downfall off of Swamp, Tri-Land Caves, and Forest Plains allows him to cast the Fleece Main Lion.
All right,
so
so
he
he can
only
take
has
one.
to take 1.
Well, 3 because he downfalls. And
Sure.
that's a 3-mana spell.
Right. This assumes that Kendall remembers the trigger too, which is an open question. So the way the board's currently constructed, Kendall's shipping for exactly lethal because the Fleece Main Line goes in front of one of the 3/2s. This is 8 points of damage coming across now.
It is 11. 3, 3, 2.
Well, he has
8
one block.
unblocked.
He has 1 block. He gains 1, and then the Hero's Downfall is basically net save 1 damage because it's 2 points from the Eidolon, but saving 3 uncontested
So
damage.
he goes to 1 then, right?
Yeah.
So Chris does survive. Unless Kendall draws something. And Chris, it looks like he's going to survive at 1 again for a second turn
Crazy.
in a row. Just threading the needle here. Kendall got so close. Last turn he dropped a 16-point life swing when Chris was at 1 point of lifelink off Nick's Fleece Ram, let him live for a turn. And here's the whole attack from Kendall. Yeah, if he just uses the Tri-Land, the Swamp, and the Caves, he can Hero's Downfall a Borderland Marauder, block a Borderland Marauder, and he should be safe at least for 1 more turn.
Yep.
That's not guaranteed that he gets there off that.
Well, then he has access to Murderous Cut the following turn.
Right, and he can delve it so he doesn't have to crack that fetch land.
Right. I mean, if Chris is able to basically survive basically next turn's combat, he should be good with the amount of life he's gaining. But it's going to be close.
We see here. And it's a pretty good find to see that he didn't have to play the Fleece Main Lion here. That actually not damaging himself off his own lands was more important. Correctly read that one. And we will see Hero's Downfall here on a Borderland Marauder. I think he's locked into it.
Yeah.
That'll take out a Marauder. Chris goes to 5. And yeah, that 1 point of lifelink off the Nick's Fleece Ram. Chris is fetching here. Oh, he's gonna go ahead and Murderous Cut as well.
Okay.
Down to 4. He's gonna have to take a point of damage and go to 3 to cast it.
So at that point, he's forced to Murderous Cut the
Doesn't
Marauder.
matter. He gains 1 off the Nick's Fleece Ram, so he can cut
Oh,
either.
right.
Right, down to 3 for now. The Downfall and the Windswept Heath adding just enough cards to his graveyard so that he's able to make this play. Murderous Cut. He'll go for the Eidolon. That frees up the Fleece Main Lion in his hand. I do like that play. And Chris once again goes to 1. Nick's Fleece Ram just saving the day over and over. And then he goes up to 2.
And now, having chained together 2 removal spells, Kendall was just short of producing lethal, but now I'm not sure he can get it back.
Yeah, Chris will likely plus the Sorin. Life points seem better than an emblem right now.
Yep.
Yep.
Get yourself out of Stoke the Flame range. Get yourself out of Lightning Strike. Just
heads up player is going to play the Fleece main line before activating Sorin. Sorin will plus. Siege Rhino is going to swing for 5. And the tides have turned. Chris goes up to 7. Kendall down to 6. It looks like he's done it and turned the corner here. Staying at 1 on consecutive turns.
Yeah, crazy.
We'll see what that draw is from Kendall. If it's a second harness by force. Oh my god!
Oh my god!
I thought that he's gonna take both of the Kendall Kasper with the 2-outer. Gets it in 3, 2-1 over Chris VanMeter.
Wow. Not only does that have to be the second harness by force in the spot where he needed the first harness by force to even be able to get this game to go on for 4 more turns, he needs to get to 6 mana in his 18 land deck.